Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome back to another very special episode of Trudge Report. We are a recovery-based podcast, but don't worry, if you're not sober or not ready to be sober, we talk about plenty of other things, including sports, trending topics, and a good bit of nonsense. But not this week. We have a very special episode all about the paranormal this week. My name is Shawn and I'm your host. I'm joined by my good friends and fellow trudgers. Please remember to listen on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Our videos will be posted each week, so you can watch episodes on YouTube and Facebook. But as always, please be sure to download on your listening platforms. Remember to like and subscribe on all social media outlets with the handle @TrudgeReportPod. We are brought to you by Stella Mix Podcast Management and our wonderful producer and editor, Miss Janine Stella. Gentlemen, good evening. A little bit different tonight. Just recording day is a little different. Kind of the way we're doing this is a little different. I'm jazzed to be here. Just real quick, how's everybody doing? Corey, you good?
I'm fine.
You look wonderful. Look fantastic. Nice hat. Bill, you doing all right?
If I was any more blessed, I wouldn't be here, baby.
Oh, look at that. Short, sweet. Love it. Love it. Greg, I'll ask you two things. I'll say, how are you? Give us a quick, how are you? And then I'm going to kick it right to you. You know what to do.
Doing fantastic. Thank you.
Very good. Right back to you. Go right into it if you want.
Yeah. So, like you were saying, Shawn, we've got a really special 2-part episode for you today. We'll elaborate on that a little bit more here in a few minutes. And hats off to Corey, because he is absolutely responsible for getting us this guest and for kind of stirring us up, man, because it was an absolute pleasure to film this episode, to talk with this gentleman. And afterwards, I recalled when Corey and I were talking afterwards, after we'd filmed it, and I felt almost like that spark when we first started doing this, where it was like, oh man, like after the episodes, it would be like, that was so awesome, and so I was really jazzed up about it. But yeah, we're heading into spooky season, right? Halloween's going to be right around the corner before we know it. At least up here in the north, the trees are going to start shedding their leaves, and the air is going to get a little crisper, and fall is amongst us. So, but no, as some of you guys know, my mom works as a hospice nurse, and this is kind of going right along with this. But I was sitting down with her over the weekend, and she was telling me, she's got all kinds of crazy stories about people crossing over, right? That's literally what she does, and she helps that transition. And she was talking about a friend of hers who went in recently for like a double mastectomy, and she went under anesthesia, and the first thing that she said when she came out of anesthesia was she told her husband that she was talking with her husband's mom and also their son, or I believe it was her husband's son, that had passed away. And she said that she, when she went there in that, whatever you want to call it, man, the ether or whatever that is, when you go under in an operation like that, you hear crazy stories about people coming out of it. You hear crazy stories about the moments before people pass, and things like that. And she said that she had a great conversation with both of them, and this is like minutes after coming out of anesthesia, but she had talked with them, and they were both doing very well, and they looked fantastic and all this kind of stuff. But then I guess kind of a little bit on a more spooky note, or whatever you want to call it, like maybe she came in contact somehow with that other side or whatever, but upon coming home and periodically for the month that's taking place in between now and then. So I guess when the son passed away, the son had a lot of health issues, and he was very young when he passed. But one of the things was he had a feeding tube, and they had him there at the house and everything like that. And she says that she can periodically throughout her days walking around the house, she can smell the very distinct smell of that. Now the kid's been gone for years and years and years, but she can smell that smell, and she can hear the beeping of the machines in the room that we're doing that. And it just, to me, again, whether or not that's all just happy coincidence or whether or not that's something that we all don't know about, right? Because again, sometimes the veil gets thin for those of us that believe in it, you know. So it's like, is that is that really what happens when you kind of halfway cross over that line or not, you know? But you know, my mom talked to her, and I've spoken to this lady before too. She's a pretty straight shooter. So for her to be saying this kind of stuff just seems like it kind of comes out of left field. It's not really like a natural. She definitely isn't one of those like kooky whack job goes and gets her palm read all the time or anything like that. But certainly just kind of a, I don't know if you would call that a feel good or a spooky kind of story, but you know, I was going to get your guys' thoughts and opinions on stuff like that and similar to that. So there you have it.
That's very interesting, Greg. And I like got onto some sort of like spooky TikTok at some point. Like my algorithm was all like spooky and stuff or whatever. And I actually came across like a hospice thing, and it's kind of weird when you dive into it and you like listen to stories and stuff, but it's also it's also a little hope giving too, right? When you're someone like me that if you've been listening to this podcast for the last 2 weeks, I've been wrestling with my mortality. Not really, but kind of. If you're someone like me, like hearing stories of people coming or people departing this earth and like saying that they like see people that had already passed on or whatever, just like different weird stories like what you're talking about. I mean, I know that God's real, right? Like, and that's what made talking to our guests so interesting too, is that a lot of the stuff that he talked about was like reaffirming and stuff that like I already believed, but just in a different way, right?
Yeah.
Like
lot of similarities there. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like I know God's power, and he just, you know, Chris just seemed to know like a different corner of all that stuff. You know, I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I believe in all that stuff, man. I believe in all the. It's obviously never happened to me. I've never crossed over and come back or seen anything, but I've heard stories of it. I 100% believe it's real. You know, just, I don't know, people seeing their loved ones shortly after death, or maybe even years after death. My mother-in-law has had some pretty interesting and really cool experiences with her husband, my wife's father, who passed a few years ago. Just, you know, I don't even know if you can call them visions, but for lack of a better word, like some visions and just some images, I guess, even more so, like when her eyes are closed, you know, just some cool stuff, little signs here and there. I'll tell you, here's a really cool, quick story. When my father-in-law passed, and I might get this wrong, and I don't want to, but I might. When my wife's oldest brother and youngest brother were at the house in Pennsylvania with her mom, you know, and when he passed, and because obviously we live here in Florida, and so does, you know, Kyle, my wife's twin brother, and the gentleman from, I guess, the morgue or whoever in their small little township in Pennsylvania comes and gets bodies like that, you know, picks them up and takes them. His name was Joe. And that is, I'm pretty sure that was, I might get this wrong. So Humphrey's family, don't yell at me if I do, but it was either, his name was Keith. My wife's husband, or my wife's father's name was Keith. And he had an older brother named Joe who passed before, or maybe that was his father's name. So the guy coming to get his body was named Joe. So like just little cool, like stuff like that. And I know that's a super common name, but I don't know, in that moment, I think, Corey, you and I have had that conversation. Like if we choose to see God in those moments, he's all around us. If we want to say it's coincidence, I guess we can. But if we choose to see the divine, whatever connectedness there, we see it. So I believe in all that.
I'd rather be the guy that is seeing the universe work together than be the guy that's like, nope, none of this means anything. you know?
Yep.
You know.
What about you, Bill?
Yeah, I generally agree.
Bill likes Ouija boards. Don't forget.
Yeah, I think that the mind's a powerful tool. So we try to brand things the way that we want, and we see things the way that we want in the moment. So I would say 99.9% of those experiences probably aren't true, but when you have the 0.1, it can be a life-changing event, and that I 100% agree that there is an afterlife and that it is a positive situation, because I've had the 0.01% experience with that kind of stuff. So, I mean, to this day, like, you know, I have the 99% all the time. To this day, there's certain birds attached to certain dead people in my life, mom, dad, this and that, and I see those attachments too. But then there's like this really, really deep one as well that feels safe. It feels like, you know, I watch this interpretation of water separating his life, and once we're born, we begin to decay, but through death, we actually return to wholesomeness and a spiritual opportunity to grow, Shawn. So that's my take on it. Yeah.
Very good. Corey, what kind of present this first episode to us a little bit? What can we expect? What are we going to get into? Give us a little rundown here for the listeners.
So I was actually going to say each of these episodes are kind of unique, apart from each other. And this first one, we're going to get into some of the stuff that's been in the headlines, surrounding the famous paranormal researchers, Ed and Lorraine Warren. What's that, Greg?
Well, I was going to say, were we going to introduce the guest? I don't think we've said his name yet, but
I said Chris, but yeah, okay. I will now. So we're getting into we're asking our guest, who is Chris McKinnnell. He is the grandson of Ed and Lorraine Warren. We get into some of the headlines surrounding those two, and the movies that nobody's ever heard of, right? The Conjuring series, the iconic Conjuring series, and you know, what he thinks of that whole thing, and particularly, we have the last Conjuring movie coming out from less than 2 weeks from this date, and it's based on a case that our guest Chris actually went on with the Warrens. Not that he's depicted in the movie, I don't believe that's the case, but he had experience with this family. It was the Smurl haunting, and he gets into a lot of that and talks about some of the extraordinary events that happened there, which I will say, you know, like we just talked about kind of what all the four of us believe and stuff. You know, in a lot of ways, when it pertains to the paranormal, you know, aside from like God and God's power in my own life, when it pertains to the paranormal, I get I wouldn't say I'm a non-believer by any means, but like I get a little skeptic. What I can say about our guest, and what I think our listeners will hear, is how absolutely authentic he was. Man, I've heard many interviews of his, and he's always that authentic. And convincing's the wrong word, because it doesn't come off as like he's trying to convince us of anything. He is telling his story, and his experience. It's
very natural to him.
Yeah, it was really good, and it was really good talking to him.
That stood out to me too, because I didn't really know what to expect. I don't know. I was a bit skeptical, not of the like the if it was real and stuff. I just didn't know what to expect, you know.
Yep. So this first episode, like I said, he gets into the Conjuring movies a little bit, the Smurl haunting, a lot of experiences as far as cases he's been on, and probably most importantly to him, what his foundation does, which is the Warren Legacy Foundation. We start off by talking about that, and how he gets to help people, much like his grandparents did. So, yeah, I think our listeners are in for a treat.
Yeah, there's a special thing in that first episode about how to protect yourself spiritually that I thought was one of the more fascinating things, you know, some practical steps that we can take to protect ourselves spiritually, which is pretty cool. So
a lot of it's not even foreign language to us, right? It's like you said, it's a lot of similarities to the spiritual life that we live.
Yeah. And I guess we can say it because he's going to say it too, but like, I had no idea he was sober. That was like so cool. You know what I mean? You know, which was really cool. So
it's a spoiler for episode 2, but that's coming up. And that's ultimately why I asked him to guest.
Yeah.
I heard him say. So,
Greg, Bill, you guys, sorry, Corey. Greg or Bill, do you guys have any comments before we head to that first episode?
I'm ready to hear from this guy again. I'm pumped. So let's have it.
All right, then roll the tape, Phillips. Roll the tape.
Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, go, Bill.
Yeah, let the interview speak for itself, man. I agree. There's not much to add. Yeah, I agree. And you can listen for yourself. And I think all four of us had different opinions going in, and all four had different opinions going out, which maybe we're a little bit closer aligned, all four of us, because it kind of helped us understand through it all. So, yeah, no one knows what the hell happened with these situations, but I know he's convicted about it. So it's interesting at the least. At the most, it's fascinating. So
Supremely interesting. Yeah. All right. Well, let's rock and roll. You guys, please enjoy this first episode with Chris McKinnnell. And remember, there is a part 2 of all this. So we'd love to hear your feedback.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest with us this episode. He is Chris McKinnnell, director of the Warren Legacy Foundation for Paranormal Research, and happens to be the grandson of world-renowned paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. Chris, how are you, man?
I'm doing great, and thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely, we appreciate your time, and your availability. I got to be honest with you, when I shot the Facebook message out, I did not expect a response, and I got one.
Everyone.
Yeah, I looked at my wife. I said he responded. It's crazy. But, yeah, so really appreciate that. To start this thing off, we got a bunch of stuff that we want to talk to you about. But first, tell us about your foundation, the Warren Legacy Foundation. You know, how it came to be, what you guys do, the general, what is it?
Certainly. Well, I personally have been doing this work for 44 years. I started with my grandparents when I was 16, excuse me. But when my grandparents' first movie came out, the first Conjuring film, we were getting hit with requests for help from all over the world. Now, they had already had the New England Society for Psychic Research, and I was afraid that people wouldn't know New England in a lot of countries. I wanted to keep the Warren name alive. So I went to my grandmother and I asked her about that, and I wanted to do an international arm to her organization, and she loved the idea. And that's how the Warren Legacy Foundation got started. When we finally had everything formalized and ready to go, unfortunately, the man that took over NESPR felt that I was too much of a threat, and he didn't want me to have anything to do with the paranormal. The truth is, he's never worked on a case in his life, so I wasn't going to stop helping people just because he wanted to be famous. Sure. So I went off on my own. This is something my grandmother believes in. It's an organization that helps people for free and confidentially all over the world. We are a completely voluntary organization. We are very careful about who helps our clients. They come first always. So they're all vetted. They all have tremendous experience. And they're all committed ethically to helping others, which is all I can really ask for.
Right. So with that, is there anything that you can tell us about when someone reaches out for help, whatever they think they're dealing with or what have you? What is it exactly that, I mean, I know you have many volunteers, but what is exactly that you guys would do? It, you know, when you watch the movies, we all know everything's going to end up in an exorcism, and that's Hollywood and it's fun, whatever. You know, what's the reality of what you guys do on maybe a specific case?
It's very different. And some of it is the same as it was with my grandparents in reality, not like the movies. So the first thing we do is we gather information. Half the job is diagnosing the actual problem, because people who are afraid, their immediate response is, "Oh my God, I've got demons." It's like,
right?
No, you don't. I'm an exorcist, and I don't believe in demons. So go figure. I believe in thought forms. I believe in manifestations that can become deadly, and they can be very real. Don't get me wrong; these are not figments of your imagination. These are actual spirits, but they're created by you and I. We have that ability. We have that power. That's one thing that the paranormal has taught me, how powerful we are. If we let go of fear, if we get rid of the underlying causes that make these manifestations negative, what are we actually capable of? So what we do first, we gather information. We ask them to fill out a Google form. We gather as much information as we can there. We evaluate that. Then we have an intake appointment with them, just like my grandparents would do. We gather more information, ask a lot of very personal questions sometimes. We're looking for that underlying issue that makes the manifestation negative. Yes, you can just be living in a haunted house, but more often than not, 10 families can live in that same house and never have any experience. Why is it's happening to you? What are you bringing to the table that we need to deal with? So, is it drug abuse? Is it domestic violence? Is it mental illness? None of that means you don't have a paranormal issue. As a matter of fact, it's more likely that you do. So we need to look at that, and then we deal with it holistically. We will take care of the spiritual side, and we will try to find you the right resources for any of the other issues you're dealing with. But we do have to deal with all of it. After that, after we've had that initial contact, we figure out our next steps for both them and ourselves. We come up with a plan, we present it to them, and then we work the plan. After a hopefully successful completion, then we follow through, we make sure things are still fine after a few weeks, and then we let them go so that they're not stuck in that moment and having to relive it over and over again.
Got you. Now you mentioned being an exorcist. I believe I heard on interviews you've done that out of all the maybe thousands of cases you've done, there's been very few of those. Is that right?
That's absolutely true. Yeah, it's not Hollywood. Right. I've worked on about 10,500 cases in my life now, and I've only assisted or led 12 exorcisms, and it wasn't something I ever meant to do. I didn't actually, yes, I sort of trained with other exorcists, assisting them and so forth. But it was an emergency situation when I did my first one. It was not planned. And once I realized, okay, anybody can do this if they're focused and have the right intentions, then I kept doing it. But it really is rare. I 44 years, 12 of them, that means one every, 3 years?
Yeah, right. Now, so I feel like I'm starting to ask questions for myself just because I'm so curious. But those exorcisms, how you don't have to go into specific details, but how not Hollywood are exorcisms? You know what I mean? Because
they can be over the top.
Yeah.
An exorcism, when it's done in the Christian style, you're going to war. So that's one of the reasons I travel around the world. I'm in South America right now. And one of the religions I've studied is Umbanda, which is an Afro-Brazilian religion that teaches the priests to become mediums. Every single priest in Umbanda is a medium, a trained medium. And they will communicate with the possessing spirit to help them to find resolution. It doesn't become a war, it becomes a mediation. I'm trying to find new ways to deal with this rare phenomena so it doesn't have to be so dangerous to the people involved. In the case of Maurice Theriault, the man known as Frenchie in the movie The Nun, or movies, I suppose. None of those movies are real, by the way. Absolute fantasy. There is no nun, doesn't exist, but the character of Frenchie was a real man, even though what you see in the movies never happened. He did come under possession. He was a poor, illiterate French-Canadian farmer living in Warren, Massachusetts, back in the 1980s. And he had been horribly abused by his father, horribly, to the point where I don't know how much I can say, but he one night went out to get his father at the barn, and his father was having relations with an animal. And his father made him do the same to hide it from his mother, make him do it so that he wouldn't tell on him. One afternoon, his father called him and said, Maurice, I just want you to know I love you. First time he'd ever said it. After a moment, he put the phone down, went in the next room, picked up, I think it was a shotgun, killed Maurice's mother while Maurice listened, and then killed himself. After that, Maurice started having experiences. He had the words, La Porta es, I don't remember how to say it in French. I used to speak French, but the door is open, scrawled into his back in bloody scratches. He was the only one in the family who spoke French, and he didn't know how to spell it. After a number of other incidents, my grandparents were called. We all went that day to interview him and his wife, Nancy. And my grandfather thought maybe it's the father. So we went to the father's grave so he could forgive his father and ask him to be at peace. And Maurice was crying in front of the gravestone, talking to his father, when we all watched him get punched under the chin so hard it lifted him up and threw him back on his back about 10 feet behind where he'd been standing. That's when my grandfather told me and my partner, Ray Jefferson, that we were going to have to stay there and gather evidence. By the time we had gathered enough evidence and I had watched him come under possession, he would bleed from the eyes. His eyes would take on the slit appearance of a snake. One incident in the greenhouse one afternoon, we were in there helping, and he came under possession. I had Ray take Nancy up to the house, and I confronted Maurice. And when he came out of it, he said his back was bothering him. And I lifted up his shirt, and there were 3 bloody crosses on his white T-shirt. And I lifted up that, and yes, there was blood on his back, but there were no marks. So I thought, I need this T-shirt. I need to take it I was at the University of Connecticut at the time. I said, I need this. I need to go examine it and find out what that is. You know, is it blood? If so, what kind of blood? He hands me the T-shirt, and it's lily white. No blood on it at all, and there's still blood on his back.
Wow.
The day of the exorcism, as Maurice was in his chair, there were 3 men behind him to protect the bishop. I was standing in front of Maurice protecting the bishop. And my grandfather and grandmother were off to the side. And my grandfather was complaining he didn't feel well. I could still hear it. And my grandmother said, "Oh, Ed, why don't you have a banana? You're probably low on potassium." She couldn't see it. She couldn't see he was having a heart attack during the exorcism. During the exorcism, even though we could not see it physically, this is amazing to me. We couldn't see this happening physically. We could see the blood drooling out of his mouth. We could see his eyes and everything else. But on film, on video, you can see this, sorry, my thing's moving.
Auto zoom.
You could see a scaly appearance on his cheeks, and then this crack appears in his forehead. I was standing right in front of him. None of that was there. And yet it shows up on the videotape. Now, I had that videotape examined when I was living in Costa Rica by a videographer. He said, we didn't have the technology to alter that up until about 6 or 7 years ago. So I thought that was pretty amazing.
Mm.
Unfortunately, we didn't understand that you'd need to deal with the problems holistically. So we thought, fine, the exorcism worked, everything's done and over. Good luck, have a good life. 2 years later, because he didn't get the psychological help he needed to follow up with it, he started sliding back again. Nancy called my grandparents. I was in the Peace Corps at the time in West Africa. And she said, I can't take it anymore. I'm getting a restraining order against him. He's coming under possession again. One night she was coming home from work, getting out of her car, and he was waiting for her. He had a shotgun. He blew her arm off, dragged her into the kitchen, sat her at the kitchen table. She thought for sure, that's it, she's going to die. And at the last moment, he put the shotgun under his head and blew his head off. My grandfather said it was a demon. I disagree. I truly believe it was his father. So what can happen, that can happen.
Right. Wow. Wow.
Question for you. Like, I haven't read several of the books that they've put out, Ghost Hunters, The Demonologist, Werewolf, stuff like that. Something I've always thought was the very, I guess, forthcoming, I guess, for lack of a better term. And maybe it was because so many people were skeptics and thought, you guys are just phonies. You're trying to scam people out of their money, or whatever the case may be. I always admired the approach that Ed took to trying to fully investigate and trying to come up with plausible, actual, whether they be scientific, whether it's gas pipes making bumps and noises in the night, whatever the case may be. But I always found that that they took a very grounded approach, So again, it's not like the movies necessarily, even though the movies do have a little bits and pieces of that in there for sure, but it's certainly not that way. It's, hey, let's do a real investigation. Let's start with all of the possible scenarios that really could be going on here, so we can narrow down what's going on and how to attack it. Do you still try and use that same kind of like almost problem solving, I guess, strategy, if you will?
Constantly. I have experienced this phenomena many times in my life. I know it exists, but I'm a skeptic on every single case. I always look for the natural over the paranormal every time. And you'd be surprised, we've learned an awful lot more since my grandparents' time. The books, by the way, some of them are great. Satan's Harvest, The Demonologist, but others are absolute crap. Don't read them. I mean, none of them were written by my grandparents. They were all written by other authors. And depending on who they had, some, a matter of fact, one of them, I was the lead investigator on The Haunting in Connecticut, which is the book In a Dark Place. Mm-hmm. Burn that, anyone who's listening who has it, just please. It's crap. It was so bad, I told my grandparents, do not use my name anymore in any of your books, in any other editions. I was in Satan's Harvest, in The Haunted, which is the Smurl case. I was like, no, not anymore. Take me out, please. So, yeah, if you don't have the first edition, I'm not there.
Well, so speaking of, let's talk briefly about the Conjuring series. Overall, I was curious as to your general opinion of the movies themselves. Like, it's got to be weird being like family and, they're portraying I couldn't imagine they're portraying my grandparents as this. And I think my own opinion, I love the Conjuring series aside from a couple movies as entertainment. But like, what is your general opinion of them?
I loved the first one. I thought that was great. As a horror film, it was wonderful. It was a novelty to see somebody playing my grandparents. I mean, I'd seen it in that TV movie back in 1990, I think. Yeah. Movie The Haunted.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, you can see on YouTube for free. But I don't see my grandparents when I see those movies. And In the second one, they were trying to combine Amityville and Enfield, and that was ridiculous. They introduced the nun, again, ridiculous. My grandparents were in Enfield for at the most 10 days. Maybe it was only a long weekend. Maurice Grossman was the man that spent years in that house. He's the man that deserves all the credit. And the idea that my grandfather's hanging outside a bedroom window by his fingertips as my grandmother is rushing through a raging flood in a basement, and then she shouts out the name of a demon and it magically goes away. It's like,
oh yeah,
not Rumpelstiltskin, for God's sake.
Yeah.
No,
Chris, let me ask you a question. So, through all those experiences, I think you said about a dozen of the exorcisms. I'm sure you've had a plethora of others. Have you ever experienced any transference, or what are your darkest times you can relate to spiritually? If you maybe want to share that with us, because I'm sure you've had a lot of spiritual warfare yourself.
Oh, yes. Unfortunately, I have. There have been times where I've been about to go on a case and they will try to intimidate me. And sometimes it gets to the point where it's so repetitive, it proves to me that these things are not fallen angels with the wisdom of the ages. Because I'm like, you keep using the same tactics and you expect a different outcome. Why? That's just stupid. Don't give me dark energy and, cold air and people and banging in the doors and the TV turning on and off and stuff. I don't care. Go away. I'm too busy. But I have had other things, much scarier things. In the Smurl house, I was lifted over the stairs, levitated over the stairs. If I hadn't been grabbed by Mrs. Smurl and the young man that was with me, who knows what would have happened. Another time I was in a poltergeist house in Tewksbury, Massachusetts. Now this is interesting. This house had been cleared. The same day as the Maurice Theriault case, we had first gone to this house and we had done a complete cleansing with Bishop McKinnell. Everything was fine for 2 years. But I was still friends with the family and they invited me and my cousin to spend the night. And my cousin didn't believe in anything happening in this house. So they invited us to stay in the 10-year-old's bed. He was in a sleeping bag on the floor, very unhappy with us. And we were in our sleeping bags. And all of a sudden, my cousin yells at me that I'm kicking the bed. I was like, I'm not kicking the bed. And so we turn off the light again. And he's like, Chris, stop. As soon as he said that, the bed picks up, flies about 10 feet across the room, smashes down, and breaks into pieces. I burst out laughing. I just had never seen anything like that. I thought it was the most amazing experience. My cousin left smoke rings getting out of there. It's like, but it made me think about it because there was never another experience again in that house. Not one. 2 years clean and then nothing ever again. I think it was the 10-year-old. I think he hooked into the energy that was still there and he manifested his own anger. Again, showing us what we can do. Now, other times, like I was about to go to a bad haunting in Philadelphia. Now, this was, 8 years ago, 7 or 8 years ago. And the gas turned on my stove 3 nights in a row without the flame. I woke up in the morning, the house filled with gas. Something really didn't want me to go. Went anyway. Those are the kinds of things that can happen. I've been stabbed. I've been burned, all sorts of stuff. But I even, at another time in Philadelphia, I was leaving a house where I had just freed a family and we were getting on the highway and the brakes went out on the car just as we're getting on the highway, smashed right into another vehicle. And then the brakes worked fine. We got home.
Wow.
Wow. You mentioned the Smurl case. So I believe that's what the new Conjuring movie is based on.
That's what I hear. Yeah, I'm not going to see it, but that's what I hear.
I'm not gonna watch it. That was one of my questions, whether you were going to watch it or not. But any takeaways from that case specifically? I actually personally didn't read much about it, but heard you talk about it a little bit.
I actually did a segment on this podcast about it. I know it's a while back to remember, but
I wasn't listening, Greg.
As usual.
Greg, you probably have a better memory of what happened than I do. I was in my last year of college, so it was 1986, and I went there 2 or 3 weekends. I didn't even go with my grandparents. My grandfather called and said, "Chris, I need you to go check out a case." And I do remember what happened to me. I remember that Mr. Smurl had been violated sexually, that I believe that kids all reported different phenomena. I remember Mrs. Smurl telling me about them finding a partially digested fetal twin that she had absorbed that was in her belly. Now, that's not unusual, actually. So, that could be explained away. But they found it while she was going through this haunting. And that's where I was levitated, of course. Other than that, I remember after I was there, it becoming a media circus. And this is something I had experienced a lot in the 80s, and I didn't like it. Now, in retrospect, I get it. My grandparents used the worst cases for 2 reasons. Sometimes they had to do it to strong-arm the church to get them to help. Like in the haunting in Connecticut, they were not getting any help from the church, so we exposed it to the public. But in other cases, they did it to get known so that other people would know where to find help. It's before the internet and everything else. It was their tactic. I didn't like it at the time. I used to argue with my grandfather about it. But today we don't have to do that, so we don't. We can do this instead.
Would you earmark any of these as you don't seem very fearful of any of this stuff, so I would say, would you earmark any of these as the scariest? And as you were saying of how these come about for the listeners out there, maybe tools to kind of get off of that plane if that happened to you, for a layman, Yeah.
Of course. I stopped being afraid after my very first case, because my very first case had the most over-the-top phenomena I've ever experienced. I was already afraid of the dark. I was only 16 years old. And in that night, as soon as we entered the house, there was pounding in the walls in repetitions of 3. I mean, like a fist bigger than my body slamming against the wall. As we went up the stairs, the walls are shaking from the pounding. I look into the bathroom at the top of the stairs, and there's a big crucifix on the wall, and it's turned upside down, just like out of Hollywood. My grandfather had me sit in the dark in the master bedroom where the woman had been attacked, while they went downstairs to use religious provocation to make this thing reveal itself even further. I'm thinking, what the hell do you need it to reveal, for God's sake? The house is vacant. But I wasn't going to let him down, and I did it. By the end of the night, we had been on WTIC AM radio 1060 with Brian Dow overnight on the telephones. And the woman at 3:15, she was 2 hulking black shapes had come down the stairs. I've got a picture of one of these. Had come down the stairs and stood on the landing looking at us. In the dark, we could see them. The woman screamed, her face was on fire. My grandfather put the flashlight on her face, and we watched 3 claw marks appear on her left cheek and blood drip on her chest. And then the pot that had the Holy Church incense in it flew out of the kitchen and straight at me. It just missed me, hit the window behind me. The shade flew up. The window didn't even break, but the pot crumpled. I said something over the radio that I shouldn't have said. And the woman started screaming she wanted out of the house, and I thought, that's a great idea. I ran to the front door as the lights are going on and off all around me now, with these hulking black shapes right next to me, basically. And the door wouldn't open. And then the chair tumbled across the room at me, the recliner I'd just been sitting in. And the door opened by itself, and she and I got out. After that night, though, I've never been afraid of anything other than things like fearful for my family's safety, my son getting in trouble, that kind of thing. But nothing to do with the paranormal.
But are there times in which people actually pass away under these circumstances? Is that a frequent thing that you come across?
No. Not. I've only lost 2 people. Now, having said that, my grandfather had a heart attack. Another one of my researchers I was sending to a bad case, I think in Georgetown, And the night before he was supposed to go, he had a stroke. He wasn't even 40. And he's fine now, but something didn't want him there. This is nothing that takes lightly. I don't like it when people treat it like a hobby. You don't deal with people's lives and their fears and everything else as if this is entertainment for you. If you're going to go in there, you go in there with respect and you go in there with knowledge. You don't watch Ghost Adventures and all of these other programs and think, okay, I understand that. Now I can go out and do it myself. That's like watching Grey's Anatomy and going out and practicing surgery.
Playing with the Ouija board or something, you think you can, do an exorcism. So,
but to answer your question earlier on how to protect yourself, some very simple, quick things you can do. Number 1, don't jump to conclusions. This will manifest according to your fears. I've seen it all over the world. That's why I don't believe in demons the way other people do. They don't manifest the same in different cultures. They always manifest according to your cultural beliefs. Whether it be a cryptid, an alien, or some form of inhuman spirit, that is being done through your belief system. I call it either a tulpa or an egregore, or a thought form.
But there's a human psyche element to it, obviously, if they're deriving it from their culture. So
but it's the human mind,
right?
Yes, there are real human spirits. They exist as well. I talk to them. I've interacted with them. I help them. I will not discriminate from the living from the dead. I help both. But don't jump to conclusions that you're dealing with the devil. You're not. You hear, I had a woman today I've been helping. She's got transitory spirits. So for some reason, we're still trying to figure it out. She's moved to a little trailer home, and there are spirits, shadows coming through her home, knocking on her door at night, growling, which I think is probably just a real animal outside. But, these are the experiences she's reported. What I'm suggesting to her is that these are actually just spirits, and all she has to start doing is laying down spiritual guidelines. Every single religion in the world does this one way or another. What I suggest you say is respectfully and firmly, this is my home. I don't want you bothering me. You're scaring me. You're scaring my children. You don't have my permission to do that. If I said that to you as a living person, you're going to usually respect that. Now, there are going to be spirits who are lost, who are frightened, who are very confused, and they're latching on to you. That's why I don't think it's very safe to go into places like haunted asylums or prisons or the hospitals, or for God's sake, the Warren Haunted Museum. There are energies in there that may be attracted to you and attached to you, and you're going to take those home with you. And those are not energies that are just going to go away because you asked them to. That's when you're going to need somebody like me.
Right.
I did have a case, by the way, another deadly case. This was in Atlantic City. A Roman Catholic man, was coming under possession. He had been evaluated by the Catholic Church. They do it the same way we do. We get a complete medical and psychological workup. We rule out all of the natural causes. I watched this man come under possession about 20 times in an hour and a half. I've never seen so quick, so many times. One evening, his wife came home and he said, "F it, I'm just going to kill him." He ran up the stairs where he had an electrical extension cord turned into a noose, and he jumped off the landing and hung himself, dying instantly. 20 minutes later, the police and the EMT are there. The woman EMT, 2 police officers in the room, the body sits up, eyes open, black as can be, looks right at the EMT and says, "He's ours now, you can't have him," and drops back down bed. I have no explanation for that. The Catholic Church had said, this is a real possession, we're going to do an exorcism, but they're a bureaucracy and they didn't move fast enough. So yes, this can be deadly.
Woohoo, boys. I don't know about you guys, but a little bit of sheer terror and a whole lot of excitement up and down my spine. Yeah.
I'm scared.
I'm scared.
Like we said, there's plenty more to come. What a great episode, or a great first half of our interview with Chris. He is absolutely a fascinating individual, and with a very fascinating story. If you want to know more about Chris, you can find him, Chris McKinnnell, on Facebook. Instagram is The Warren Files. He has a Facebook set up under the Warren Legacy Foundation, and also this official website, warrenfiles.com. He's got a Patreon, Pinterest. He does stuff on YouTube under the Warren Files as well, where he does very cool like webinars and stuff like that, Zoom webinars that are free and available to everybody.
Yeah, they're free. So, that was so fascinating to me that all that stuff's free.
Yeah.
The once a month webinar is a charge, but that's the only thing he charges for.
Right.
And he's got to pay his rent.
Yeah.
But otherwise, all the services he offers people is free.
Yes. So again, whether you are a paranormal fanatic or a true skeptic, I think that this stuff is important and interesting for all, right?
Yep.
But we had a lot of fun doing it. We cannot wait to bring you the second part of this episode next week. So please tune in, like, follow, subscribe,
Thumbs up.
send us some emails if you're pumped up about this. If you got questions, if you've got someone you're trying to contact from the beyond, email us, trudgereportpod@yahoo.com. And if you're struggling, again, on a side note, if you're struggling with any kind of addiction, need some help, whatever, please feel free to contact us. Follow us on all socials at Trudge Report Pod. Good night. God bless. We can't wait to bring you episode 2 next week.